Dean Glader, Levine, Malloy, and Zayal are here, and Commissioner James is not. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda?
No.
Anybody? Okay. Tonight's public hearing will address case number ORA 23-0001, Land Use Development Code Amendment to Title 8 regarding code enforcement. Tonight's process will be Director Callahan will provide an overview for the proposed changes and answer questions that the planning commissioners may have. Then the hearing will be open for public comments. And once all comments have been heard, the commissioners will move to deliberations. Does anyone feel that they have a conflict of interest with the agenda item?
No.
Okay. Director Callahan, if you'll.
You are muted. You can mute or.
Pardon me. I was trying to mute people that should be muted, and I inadvertently muted our staff, but I think I've got it all together. So.
And now Commissioner James is here.
I'll wait till he has a moment to get seated. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Before you this evening,
Is this meeting being recorded?
not sure what that's about, is a proposed code amendment. Your job this evening is to take testimony and deliberate and finally make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. I will be brief because we have discussed most of this in workshop, but I do want to point out a few things for the audience's sake. First of all, there's a typo, thanks to Commissioner Zao. I want to show on the screen, you see where it's marked or of twice. Of course, that just needs to be stricken. Thank you for catching that. And we'll strike it for the next hearing. But the easy way to think of what's before you is there are really two things we're asking for. One is to change the way that we send notice in certain circumstances for code violations so that we can use regular U.S. mail, first class, under certain defined circumstances. Our thinking is that it saves time and money and is more efficient for reasons we've discussed in workshop. The other thing that's of issue in front of you tonight is that this proposed amendment would allow me as the director to impose up to a $1,000 a day fine for violations with a not to exceed number of $20,000. As we've discussed in workshop, the rationale for this is that currently we have no real penalty for code violations. There is a small fee that a violator pays if they fix the problem at the end of the process. But we have cases that have drug on literally for a decade because there was no incentive for the property owner to fix the problem. And so even that minimum fee wasn't paid. And so there is no inducement for people that do the right thing to be rewarded and people that do the wrong thing to find a penalty. So this attempts to put at least the ability to penalize people doing the wrong thing in a way that I hope will get attention and reduce some of the significant problems we've had over the years. I should mention that in your workshop we went over, and I'll pull up on the screen here, an analysis that the staff did that looks at how these amendments comport with the policies in the comprehensive plan. As you'll recall, we found, and as you see on the screen, that in each case, any policy that is related to this, we think is supportive of it. So we think this is properly before you, we the staff, I mean, and ready for your consideration. That's really all I have for you unless you have questions.
Any commissioners have any questions for Director Callahan?
No.
Okay.
I do have questions. I don't know if I should address them now or
Yeah.
after it went on. I guess. Do well. Oh, up here.
There you go.
There. So it's complicated, at least in my mind, and it has to go to the penalties portion of it. And it has to do with $1,000 per violation per day with a maximum of 20. And we talked about this before at some workshop weeks ago or months ago. And made some changes, but I did learn recently what jointly and severally means. And I think, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it means that there are like 6 people involved in the entities that are being served. Those are 6 people that could be fined $1,000 a day per violation.
Well, sort of. If in the scenario where you have 6 people or entities that have actually been found liable for the penalties, you could go after any of those persons or all of them or any combination thereof for the entire amount of the penalty.
But it wouldn't be 6 separate.
Correct.
So
There would still be one penalty, but you would just have more people that you could potentially go after to get that.
Here I thought I understood it.
Okay,
I'm
well,
glad you asked.
hopefully that clarifies it more for you.
It does. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll direct this to the attorney. As you read this language, it's kind of a related question. What's the maximum penalty? How do you read the maximum penalty language per incident? Because that kind of was the rub, and how much is that to?
An incident, sorry.
So I'm a landowner. I hired a contractor.
James, is your
You got it.
mic on? Thank you.
On the stand?
Over here, there's this light on it.
On the stand.
There we go. Okay. So I'm a landowner. I hired a contractor. I'm building a multi-unit, and the plumber has a code violation, and the guy who's and he hires let me say, I'm putting a drain field in. A guy's putting a drain field in, and he has a code violation. Kind of part of the plumbing, kind of not. And then you have, while he's putting the drain field in, he changes the entrance to the property or to the units, and that is a code violation. Are those all separate incidences, and then how do you add up the maximum, or are they not? If it makes sense, does that make sense?
Yeah, in your scenario, each incident, each instance of code violation could be considered a separate incident because, you have one violation here, say a building code violation for problematic plumbing, another code violation here for a site disturbance violation when it comes to as far as the drain field goes. And then a third one is a land use code violation for failure to comply with the requirements of a driveway or whatever. Those could be 3 separate incidents. They could be subject to each penalty of up to $20,000 per, for each incident. So it could be a total, at least theoretically, of $60,000 altogether.
Right, and I'm not being critical, I'm just trying to put
I
it in
no,
Glad
realistic,
you asked. That's a good question.
yeah,
I mean,
context.
even if you were being critical, I would want to,
Well, I'm not.
honestly.
It just helps me
people
to
know.
put it in context. So back to my hypothetical, so let's say we're all kind of working together, we have a joint venture going, whatever, or I mean, at what point are you going to apply joint and several? I mean, joint and several can be a little bit.
Yeah, for the, going back to the scenario, for the plumbing incident, you could seek the penalty, whatever penalty is imposed against either the plumber or the owner. Same with the drain field digger or the owner, and, say the driveway builder or the owner.
Okay.
So and then I know you understand joint and several liability because you're an attorney yourself.
I also used to bang nails, so I understand that side of it too.
Yeah. So,
But this is after notice. The owner's been given notice. You're in violation
Right.
because the sub's now long gone. He's down in Tahiti somewhere, sunbathing, and everybody's gone. The owner's there stuck, and he's hit with all these violations. But I can avoid the penalty by just fixing it, getting someone in to fix it.
Right.
And then my last question,
the
Atlantic,
director would have discretion to waive any penalties previously
that was my last question. What discretion?
imposed based on, the actions of the
Okay.
owner or the people that caused the problem to fix the problem. And that, the whole thing is to try to incentivize fixing the problem. So,
I do have a follow-up question on it. In your experience, when you find a code violation, is it usually just one? Because back when I was banging nails and putting houses together, I found that when there were code violations, there's usually multiple ones. It was usually, maybe a bad contractor or something. But I don't know.
Well, is often the case.
Okay.
And I should clarify, this is a point that Pat and I haven't discussed, but I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm glad you brought up the plumber as a question, because my view of this is it's the land use and development code. Plumbing is under the building code.
Oh, okay.
I don't have the authority to define under the building code.
Okay, got it.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. The building code ordinance would govern violations of the building code, and that would be a separate process.
But your point's still well made and well taken. We still get multiple issues. We would still potentially have that question.
And there's, again, there's discretion if there, violations that are closely related, then, only a single penalty could be imposed. Trying to think of an example of that.
Sorry for my ignorance, but under the UBC, is there a separate violation penalty?
Yeah, it's actually really similar language. It's just that
You have to go to court.
the amount is different as it stands today. And the next time we go through the process of adopting new building codes, we can certainly look at that at that time.
Okay.
But it is under, the authority for that is under a separate statute and separate process. It just, for example, it goes directly to the county commissioners. But they could do something similar to this here if they chose to do so.
Sorry, one last thought, comment. I'll make sure I'm right on this. So the joint and several concept, it's really going to be the owner and the general contractors that are really going to get.
It could be the owner,
probably
the
that.
general, the sub,
Well, but
potentially.
yeah, but okay.
But let me
Hang on.
clarify that, because I thought we had this discussion that the actual notice of the violation goes to the legal, known holder of any legal interest in the property.
Right.
So if a contractor does something that causes the owner to get a violation, it's the owner that is responsible for correcting it and would be liable for the fine. They can choose to go later on to the contractor but I don't.
They could do that, in the case, say the owner's fined $5,000, and the owner and the contractor are found liable for the violation, and the owner ends up paying the $5,000 fine, they could go after the contractor for half of that.
Oh, no,
That's how joint and several liability.
But that's not the county's responsibility.
Actually, that is that is not new language. I've just moved it from where it currently is.
But the counties,
In cases where multiple individuals, firms, corporations, or agents participated in violating this title, I'm reading what it says now.
okay,
They may be held jointly and severally liable for any remedies, penalties, or payments. So that's, that language is on the books now. I just simply, I switched that with a different sentence, just for, clarity and flow.
It's E on the screen here.
Actually, yeah, it's the stricken language, and then that's in C. It was moved to C. If you could move up.
Right,
Not that C,
There.
the new C.
the new C.
And you can see that language underlined.
Right.
And the other language that's underlined below is stricken here.
So
She's got her hand up, but I have an answer to you.
So my understanding of this was that we're basically trying to prevent negligence and gross mismanagement by various individuals.
Yeah.
And that we don't have a police force that goes around looking for that.
Correct.
And typically, it's adjacent property owners that file a notice or complaint with
Yeah.
you.
Or it could be it could be a building inspector, it could be a planner that goes out there, or a neighbor.
Yeah.
But you're right, that's the typical scenario.
And so the problem has not been there for just one day or 2 days before
Right.
somebody files a complaint via some method. And so this is to allow a little bit more bite to the complaints. And
Yeah, that would be the objective.
And that's my interpretation of what we're trying to do here.
I, for one, think you have it spot on, and I'll just add that I've been at this for 9.5 years here in this county, and it's been more than a little frustrating to deal with cases where the owner does things with impunity and we have no way to get their attention.
I think Mr. Levine actually triggered some thoughts, questions here. If I'm reading it right, given what his concern was, there's joint and several liabilities extremely, well, I just say extremely broad. It's broad. It applies to the landowner, tenant, subdivider, builder,
Yeah.
basically anybody or participates in, assists in, or maintains such violation.
Correct.
And the notice
And
of
it's intentionally made broad.
Yeah, and again, not being critical, just so to make sure we understand, it's a broad statute. So the subcontractor could get hit with joint and several liability for the violation, or it could be the owner, or it
Right.
could be both, or whatever.
Yeah.
And the notice goes, I should have read this, I read it a week ago, and I should have read it again before I came in. Notice goes to the owner.
Yes.
Does notice go ever to or does it required to go to the violator, let's say the subcontractor?
It's not required, but nothing would prohibit that.
Do you have a due process problem? If you find a subcontractor, I mean, he's off 6 months later doing another job.
Right.
He didn't notice a violation. You've given notice to the owner. I guess the concern I'd have is if I were on the other side of that, Pat, I'd argue due process violation of some kind probably because he didn't get any notice that he had violated. Maybe that wouldn't fly, but I'm just wondering, is there a due process issue there?
Well,
I mean, the owner has an,
I understand
Yeah.
your question, and that's why I'm hesitating, because there potentially could be I think there would need to be notice issued to, at least prior to the imposition of a penalty against that participant.
yeah, I mean, I don't know the constitutional law like you do, but it seems like it could be a due process violation.
Assuming we know, we may not know who this, if there's a contractor who's the applicant's representative, we may not know who their subcontractor is that actually,
See,
So-
that's why we've talked about this I'm real confused.
and I don't think we could find, in that scenario, I don't think we could find the subcontractor, at least without, notice that.
Yeah, I mean, in
Right.
application, it's safer to give notice to the contract, everybody involved to give them notice is a violation, right? 'Cause
Yeah,
it-
at least if we're considering,
You
finding.
negate that, yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, and the owner doesn't have, due process doesn't apply to the owner. They can, back to Dave's point, they can bring
Still
a.
applies, they just get notice automatically.
Well, no, but what I mean is, if you have a contractor and owner, contractor violates, contractor leaves, owner's given notice as a violation, contractor doesn't know. You have a due process issue with the contractor, it seems like, if you're gonna try to get,
If
pay
you
the,
then try
assess
and
the
get to
fine.
the contractor.
You can assess the whole fine against the owner, and the owner has a claim of indemnification against the
Correct.
contractor.
Yeah.
That's how that would play out, but to be safe, you'd give notice to both, because then you could assess the fine against both.
Yeah, and I think if we're considering, anybody we're considering assessing a fine against should get notice of that before we make that final decision. I agree with that 100%.
Well, one of the things I'm real confused about, because we talked about this, is why is the county trying to track down, the owner is responsible for the following, and the way it's written, it doesn't say, it says legal interest in the property. It's section C.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
And why are we complicating it? If I am the owner of the property and I am responsible to ensure that my contractors are following the procedures set out. If the county wants to fine the owner, they have whatever legal right they have to try to recover or encourage. Because the reason we did it this way was we want the owner to get the contractor to do what the contractor should be doing. And if we go and say, well, if the owner doesn't do it, we'll go try to find the contractor, the owner may not want to do it. So I think this is a new discussion, at least in my understanding, and that's why the language was written in there. You could have multiple owners of the property, on the property, but the contractors, I think, should be out of the county's responsibility.
I don't necessarily agree, to be honest.
Okay.
I think as a general rule, I think you're right, but I think we need the flexibility to go after, whoever actually committed the violation or failed to comply with their standards. At least in extreme cases, there can be bad contractors out there, there could be,
But is that the county's response? I mean, again,
I think the most likely scenario where that would be applied would be as if we actually went to court.
yeah. But we're talking about a
But we
fine,
still need the language in here to go to court to prevail on a claim like
but it
that.
doesn't say that under the notice. Then you get back to the notice again. The notice is not
Well,
going to the
In
contractor.
a court situation, they would get notice through the filing of a complaint,
Okay, that's fine.
getting served with a summons.
How I see it is
Like I
that,
said, that language has been in here for a long time.
yeah, what they're doing there is, as I see it, is they're holding the owners responsible, but they're giving themselves the flexibility to go after contractors and subcontractors in addition. And
That's fine. I'm not opposed to
Yeah.
that. I was hearing like, the county's going to do this, the county's going to do this. The original notice goes to the legally owner
Right.
of the property.
Right.
Period. The county may later on decide, due to unique circumstances, they may need to go after other individuals who
Yeah.
are responsible.
Right.
But,
And
and Okay.
to be honest, I mean, it would take a pretty egregious circumstance
yeah,
to do that. But that was the kind of the part of the discussion between Commissioner James and myself is, are there any due process issues that might come up? And we had that discussion, and
yeah.
if we were to do that, we would have to give, anybody that we, plan to penalize
Okay.
in some way due process.
So I think we're all agreeing.
Okay.
yeah.
I think what I was getting hung up on was this section C, and you were talking about a different section.
Oh, well, yeah.
In practice, if I had it right, and tell me if I don't, but in practice, isn't it you face some egregious circumstances where you have the same contractor over and over cutting corners and violating the code, sometimes in similar ways in different projects?
Yes.
And this, yeah, I mean, yes, good contractors out there, they'll, give them a beer and they'll tell you who the bad ones are. There's certain ones that violate over and over, right?
Right.
And so this will give you the flexibility to go after them if you want to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Because landowners look to the contractors often for advice on how, they don't know what the UBC is and what the,
Very
site
often.
disturbance ordinance is. Oh, they don't know that. And
Right.
they look to their contractor for that guidance. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Any other
But-
questions from commissioners?
Nope, a lot of good questions.
Those were
though.
good questions. Thank you.
Okay. With no other questions from commissioners, we'll open the public comment section. And each member of the public may speak for up to 5 minutes. Members of the public should provide name and address for the official record. Public comment period is not a debate or discussion of issues. Commissioners may ask questions of commenters for clarification purposes, but will not engage in back and forth discussion. So with that, Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First I'll read 3 names of people that have said they are opposed but do not wish to speak. So in opposition is Renee LaCroix, Pat, I'm not sure if that's Muller or Muller,
Yeah, I think it's.
or Miller, might be,
Miller.
but Pat is opposed. He lives in Rathdrum, or she. And Deborah Andrews is opposed, does not wish to speak. So any of those people, if they're here or online, if they change their mind, they can certainly speak. But moving on to those that are in favor and wish to speak, first on the top of the list here is Jeff Harvey. So Jeff, please come to the lectern and tell us what you think.
My name is Jeffrey Harvey. I live at 5925 East Hayden
Oh.
Lake Road.
Thank you.
My name is Jeffrey Harvey. I live at 5925 East Hayden Lake Road. I'm a 25-year resident of on Hayden Lake, and I fully support this modest step forward. I'd call it a modest step forward. I have seen many, and as the lots get more difficult to build, I've seen many problems on, certainly on the granitic, but all along the East Road, the populated part of the East Road, East Hayden Lake Road. And everything from tons of sediment going in like 2 doors down from me to a house down there being undermined, and I might say all by the same contractor. I'm not going to mention any names. But I've seen a terrific amount. This is, to me, a modest step forward. On the issue of landowner, the landowner is responsible. He's the one who holds the permit. I own land in 3 states. I'm responsible for that land, that period. End of story. I hold the permits, and I hire contractors, and I make sure the contractor does his job. And any landowner who doesn't know what the contractor is or doesn't know what the rules are is a fool. He needs to do that. So I urge you to pass this on to the county commissioners. I think, like I say, it's modest. I think there should be some means to compound these for the really bad actors, and there are bad actors out there. I fully support the landowner as the person who's primarily responsible here, nobody else. And he's got legal recourse against any contractor who gets out of line. Thank you.
Next is Ross Wilkins. It doesn't actually say whether they're in favor, neutral, or opposed, but Ross wishes to speak, so Ross, please come to the lectern.
Hi, Ross Wilkins, and I live at 12970 North Knox Drive. And actually, my wife's going to be up here and go over some of the summary comments from some work we've done. I think one of the issues that we've identified it's a cascade of issues. real estate agents sell land to people and say, oh, this is a perfect building site, and then it just goes on from there. And I'm sure you've experienced that. And I guess I was a little disappointed to find out the county actually has no overlay plan that identifies areas of high risk for building, whether it's on the lake shore or in wetlands. And my plea is, obviously I'm in favor of this, but my plea is that a plan like that would be developed so that right from the start, unscrupulous real estate people, everything else, people can look up on the public record and say, well, no, this land is not buildable unless we, do all of this stuff, because it just tumbles down. You get engineers who approve land, don't even go in and inspect the site. We have cases of that. They don't even see it and they just sign off on it for, their professional fee. So if the county had an overlay plan and identified those areas at risk, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Next is Jan Wilkins, in favor, wishes to speak.
Hi, I'm Jan Wilkins. I am the president of the Hayden Lake Watershed Association. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your service, and what you do is important, and I know it takes a lot of time. I've been in your shoes and in your seats, and it's a labor of love for this county, what you're doing, and thank you for that. On May 9th, the Watershed Association sponsored a code enforcement workshop, and Mr. Callahan was our guest speaker. And he outlined to us some of the proposals that he's going to make. And so I'm here to say that our board fully supports his proposed changes. David probably knows me a lot better than he'd like to, because he gets calls from someone on our lake, in our organization, so often. And it's because we all know there's some real bad actors out there, and they kind of ignore the rules because penalties aren't swift and they're not stringent enough. And a lot of people just build these fees, whatever, into their contracting fees, and just pass it right on to the owner. Have no intention of complying. They know they're going to get red tagged. They're going to ignore the red tags. Erosion is going to continue to dump into our waterways or onto our neighbor's property, or houses are going to continue to slide into the neighbor's property because excavation was done too close to the property line. All that's going to happen, and then they're going to beg for forgiveness. Well, that's just not acceptable, and it's not fair to the people that play by the rules. So this is what we would like to suggest. Stiffer penalties. Obviously, what we think David is suggesting is great. We would say make them stiffer. Have them escalate. If they're not corrected in a week, they go up to $1,500 a day. If they're not corrected in 2 weeks, they go up to $2,000 a day. It should be painful for people to ignore the rules. And I guarantee you that if you do this, you will find that people are going to start paying better attention to the rules. Because it hurts. It's going to need to hurt in order for them to do business differently. So stiffer penalties, escalating penalties. There needs to be a way for violations to be reported anonymously. We've had instances in our community where people are threatened, literally threatened, physically and with lawsuits, if they pursue reporting a violation. That's just not right. That is not the way we want to be. We don't want to be in that position as neighbors, that they know who turned them in. Well, come on. There should be an anonymous reporting method. We also strongly support that that owners should be held responsible. We also strongly support that it should be at the discretion of this department to go after both the contractor and the owner, but we do believe that the owner should be held responsible. I'd like to give you our notes from our meeting. A lot of the things that we covered you're not addressing tonight, but I hope that maybe they'll start some thought processes going, because I'm hoping that this is the beginning of improvements, not an end. And I just have to compliment your Director of Community Planning. He does such a terrific job of dealing with a lot of really unhappy people, from both sides, from all sides. And he just approaches things so calmly and so professionally. We really should be proud of him. So I'm going to give him a couple copies for that table.
That'll be read in as P1002.
Thank you so much for your time. And please call me if you have any questions after you have a chance to read that.
Next in the stack is the Twin Lakes Improvement Association. They're actually opposed, and they'd wish to speak.
Good evening. It's Twin Lakes Improvement Association, P.O. Box 620, Rathdrum, Idaho, 83858. First, I want to recognize the Community Development Department, specifically David and his staff, for their continued efforts to collaborate with organizations like Twin Lakes Improvement Association. Just like you just heard from Hayden Lakes Association, David has continually worked with us and afforded me the courtesy of this ordinance and the opportunity to discuss it with our board. We've had the opportunity to work on shoreline management with David's department and offered recommendations and suggestions of which were incorporated within their revision of that management plan. And so want to now give you the other side of things we'd like you to consider as well when you're looking at this code and why we think there are some needed changes before you accept it. Twin Lakes is an Idaho, nonprofit corporation. Its eligible members and property owners own property within a mile of the Upper Twin and Lower Twin shorelines. That's approximately 1,200 properties. Twin Lakes submits these comments on behalf of its members. Twin Lakes Improvement Association submits the following comments in opposition to the proposed amendment to the County Code Section 8.8603. TLIA recognizes the Community Development Department's frustration with those that are ignoring the department's rules and regulations. The proposed amendment in Section 8.8603B seeks to add authority to the Director of Community Development to impose civil penalties of fines $1,000 per violation per day for the maximum amount of $20,000 per violation. This is in addition to the prosecuting attorney's current civil penalty authority within Section 8.8603D. Nothing in this amendment establishes any limitations on these factors. The fine is solely up to the Director's unfettered discretion. The current code already provides authority for the prosecuting attorney to bring enforcement action for the $1,000 per day up to $10,000. This requires the county staff to make the case to the county attorney before any enforcement action for civil penalties can occur. This is a good check and balance. If the existing civil penalty cap of $10,000 needs to be increased, and we think it does, then increase it to $20,000. This would be the place to do it within the existing code, not by giving new civil penalty authority to the county staff. The proposed director-imposed fines are without standards or criteria. There are no means to differentiate the director-imposed fines from the fines imposed under Section D through action by the prosecuting attorney. There's no language to establish criteria or explanation as to why There being fines imposed both by the director and through the action of the prosecuting attorney. A fine imposed by the director under the proposed language is subject to 3 factors: whether a fine is warranted by the circumstances, whether the amount of the fine, including the daily continuation, is warranted by the circumstances, and whether the amount of the fine is consistent with the prior and similar circumstances. Under the proposed change, the county staff can unilaterally impose civil penalties of $1,000 per day up to $20,000 for any violation they feel has occurred with no appeal process. This would eliminate the check and balance with the county attorney prior to any civil penalty being imposed, and would also eliminate the due process. It appears this new civil penalty can be added to the amount of the civil penalty that may be sought by the county attorney under the existing code, which is up to $10,000 for a total of up to $30,000. This type of double jeopardy seems to be overly punitive. In section 8.8601E of the county code provides for the appeal of notice of violation or stop work order. That language does not specifically address or provide for an appeal of the director's imposed fine. Neither does the language of 8.8501 et sec specifically provide for the appeal of the director's imposed fines. There's no current code language or proposed amendment language to identify the director's imposed fines as a department action subject to the right of appeal. The proposed language providing the director imposed fines does not differentiate between the circumstances of blatant, repeat violations and/or single inadvertent violations and imposing risk of the discretionary. TLI urges the Planning Commission to reject the proposed amendment, or at least to address the points raised by TLIA by establishing uniform objective criteria for the imposition of the director fines. TLA is providing a red line proposal for the Planning Commission's consideration. This version eliminates the proposed civil penalty authority for the director while leaving intact the increased civil penalty for the county prosecutor. And this is,
These will be P 1003.
these are for David.
Next is Jeff Sparks in favor, but doesn't say if Jeff wishes to speak.
He's coming up.
Oh, I guess he does then.
I do. Thank you. Jeff Sparks. I live at 1196 South Reagan Drive, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's Bonanza Ranch. I'm in favor of this. The neighborhood that I live in is full of code violations. David has done a great job of trying to address those. A lot of code violations have been, complaints have been filed, and no action really can be taken. So I ask that we give him the authority to make these changes. And to the last speaker's point, it's not working. It may be already in some of the language now, but we need new language, new law that allows David and his staff to make changes that need to be made. And people aren't listening. They just do what they want to do, and code violations that are under his purview end up creating other violations that are outside of his purview. We have neighbors that have basically dug holes for their own septic systems. They're stealing power from other residents. The water situations should be looked at. Obviously, nothing that he can do about some of those things, but it leads, those violations that he can't act on, leads to other problems. So appreciate your attention.
Next is Jason Hegstad, and he didn't check, but I believe he's in favor, and he does wish to speak.
I am in favor. Thank you. My name is Jason Hegstad. I live at 6630 East Little Joe Road out in east of town off of Mullen. We live in a rural residential neighborhood. Jeff is also in the same neighborhood and has witnessed a lot of the same issues. Not just building issues. There are definitely some building issues, or people living in structures that don't have occupancy certification or permits. There are a lot of issues with people that that have no septic, no way of removing their waste, so it ends up running into the local watershed. And so there are things like that. A lot of folks treat our area as an RV park, and it's not an RV park. There's the ability to have RVs part-time or intermittently, but there are people that live year-round and never move, never dump. And it's just become, there's a lot of people disregarding the rules. There are codes about how many unused vehicles you can have on your property, not enclosed in a shelter or behind a fence. And there are neighbors that have so many unworking vehicles just out, and a lot of some properties have a lot of garbage and debris and tools and all of the stuff that should be in a structure all over the place. And while they can file a code violation, or neighbors can complain, they can cite them, they can't really, again, have teeth in enforcing that, because they can maybe go to court, maybe get a fine that's a lien on the property for some time in the future, and maybe that lien is paid if they ever sell or if they die, but it's not something that changes any of the behavior. So in the instance of a property that's full of trash and full of all kinds of things outside, they never really have to clean it up, even if there's a judgment to have them clean it up. They can be brazen and just not do it, and there is no penalty for that. So, or no enforceable penalty until potentially maybe a small lien is taken care of later. But I am in favor of the rule, because we have just so many people breaking the rules, and potentially if some of them start hearing that there are people that haven't been enforced against, maybe they'll stop doing it. So that's all. Thank you.
Last in my list of in-person speakers is Danny Peterson, and then we need to go online and see if anyone from Zoom wants to speak.
He's actually on the Zoom call.
Oh, Danny is? Okay. Well, in that case, it's a good time to go to Zoom. And I'll just say, I'll just open it up. Say, is there anyone on Zoom that wishes to speak? If so, just please unmute yourself and give us your name and address.
Am I on?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Danny Peterson. I live at 1392 South Regan Drive in Coeur d'Alene, Bonanza Ranch area. I'm a lifelong resident, born and raised in Coeur d'Alene, and to be quite honest, I'm appalled by what's going on and what's being allowed to go on. I think that this law needs to have teeth, and I'm kind of with some of the earlier speakers. More teeth is better. We've tried doing the right thing and taking it to the attorneys and going to court, and they were fined a small amount and flagrantly violated the order of the court to continue with the cleanup, and it's worse than it ever has been. Anyway, I'm for it, and please do something to help us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peter. My fiance Dia and I live at 6786 East Cartwright Road in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in the Bonanza Ranch area as well. We had a meeting with David and his crew a few weeks back and had a great education of how much their hands are tied. And that's a big part of the problem. So we support the fact that we give more control to them. I agree with stiff penalties. I like the idea of penalties increasing if they don't follow it. I've got a neighbor across the way that is the one that's done the hand-dug ditch. He's dumping septic material. He's got an extension cord running about 100 yards up to a neighboring property, which is a fire hazard going through the grass. We have a lot of trees up here, so we're concerned about that. And then his own human feces that he is dumping onto the ground from his house comes right into a creek that comes through our property and down into Lake Coeur d'Alene. We spend time in there every spring cleaning it up. This year we have not because of the runoff that he is putting in there. He's living in an unpermitted shelter. It's a shed. He built it purposely under 200 feet, but he does live in it full time. He lied to George today, George Sepulveda, who works with David, that he lives at his dad's house in Hayden. I have been documenting Paul's house, both in video and photos, for about 30 days now, and I continue. And I take photographs multiple times a day to prove that he is living there full time. He has a 10-gallon propane tank sitting outside by his septic tank that he has hardlined into his house. This is just one example of what is going on in our Bonanza Ranch area. So I totally agree with the penalties and increasing penalties. Dee and I are private real estate investors. And some of the things that have happened in Coeur d'Alene to remove blight, we have a lot of drug dealing problems up here. And what happens in the city of Spokane a lot is you are given these fines, you are given deadlines. And if you do not comply to the request and the demands of the county, they will seize your property, and it will go up for auction. I believe that these are the kind of penalties that people will finally take a look at and not waste George's time, David's time, and the rest of his crew coming out and giving out citations and everybody else filing complaints, but then we get stuck because, as everybody else is saying, they continue to do it. And there's no resolution at the end of it. And a lot of times when I look at that, it's like, why do our tax dollars even go to this process when we can't enforce anything? So I think David and his crew should have complete, total discretion to write fines, to hold people accountable, to give them time frames, that this stuff needs to be done. George was out here today trying to find Paul because Paul still has not dug up his ditch. George put up a stop work order sign on his property, but he's doing nothing to rectify any of the issues. And they are serious health issues, fire issues. So I think these guys need to have control, and other agencies need to be brought into this, like things that George and David can't address or do, that we can bring them into the loop of this to give them the authority to stop this illegal 100-yard electrical cord that's spliced together in grass that's going to be dry here in the next 3 months and create serious fire hazards up here. We have a lot of trees up here, and people will lose their homes because of this negligence. And I do agree also that all of this should be held completely on the landowner, whoever owns that property. It is their responsibility to make sure, like the other gentleman that was up, that he checks all of his contractors. He makes sure he has the right permits. He makes sure everything is being done right. That is a property owner's responsibility. And Dia and I have jumped through hoops with issues we've had here, working with Jay because we had to move a septic, and we go through all the permitting process. We make sure they come out. We make sure we're doing it right, so we don't contaminate our waterways or cause any other issues or do something we should not be doing. And these people who are just negligent and don't care, continue to do what they do, need to be held accountable. And these guys, our county commissioners, all of them, need to have the authority to write those tickets, write the citations, hold them accountable. So thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else on Zoom that would like to speak to this issue?
I would like to.
Please announce yourself and your address and go right ahead.
My name is Beth Parsons. I live at 6998 East Buckboard Road in the Bonanza Ranch, Coeur d'Alene. I've lived here for over 30 years. We recently sold our home at 1122 South Ponderosa Drive of over 40 years due to the fact that Paul Perez on the corner of Cartwright and Ponderosa gives us no peace. And we are tired of fighting issues at the county enforcement officers have been diligent about. They've been lied to by these individuals that say they're not living in unpermitted shed. And campers, RVs, long-term use, not intermittent, long-term. And Paul Perez has lived in that 200 square foot shed for a year and a half. And I am neighbors to Peter and Dia as well, and can testify to that and would love to sign an affidavit. But would love to see the county, David Callahan's group and code enforcement, have the right to fine them $1,000 a day, whatever it takes to get these people's attention to stop thumbing their noses at code enforcement's a $245 code enforcement fee that's never been paid by Mr. Robertson up the road. And it's just been sitting there and nothing happens. We need more teeth for these code violations, protect our neighborhood, protect Kootenai County wide, because we know we are not the only problem area, but please give them the right to make these people compliant. And the only thing that unfortunately is going to be is financially hit them where it hurts. And maybe that'll get their attention. They'll start cleaning it up. I'm over and out.
Anyone else on Zoom at this time? Hearing none, I did receive one new in-person request from Larry Lucky. Would you please come to the lectern and tell us what you want us to hear?
My name is Larry Lucky. I live at 6637 East Little Joe Road, also in Bonanza Ranch. Everybody has spoke very calmly and eloquently to you. I will choose to be more direct today. You guys are worthless. You guys are weak. You do not have the balls to take care of these issues. You do not have the ability to take care of these issues. The 2 women need to know their place. The 5 men need to know their place. Those aren't my feelings. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Paul Perez, Randall Robertson, Brandon, whatever his last name is, it's up there, and another guy that's up on the corner. That's how they talk about you guys, law enforcement and the police. You show up there with the uniform, you might get an AR bullet in the chest. I don't want to live like that. It is ridiculous. The one thing I will agree with them on is that I feel like we are being robbed by our tax dollars. But what I said to you guys is hurtful. It's not anything that I feel, but it is said and felt by those guys every single day when they thumb their nose at Dave, George, I forget this gentleman's name that's been up there. These guys are polite and professional. They have to be. The other guys aren't. They can stop just short of threatening to shoot your ass or hit you with a hammer or all of us, including Beth, multiple times. And we sit there and take it because you guys haven't given us the power to fight back, and you haven't given the people that we pay our taxes to protect us the ability to do so. I shit you not, we're going to make national news one of these days. Do you not understand how bad it is? You drink the water in this town. The guy is dumping his feces on top of our aquifer, and when he's told not to, his words are expletives. You cannot make him. That's his belief. He has heard it. He has heard it. Every one of our neighbors there has heard it to some degree or other. They've all spoken very politely and eloquently, like I said, but a more direct approach might work better. We're not asking you guys to do anything other than give these guys the ability to enforce the laws that we have. A law with no enforcement doesn't do anything. The simple fact is, if I want to drive down the road 35 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour speed zone, I do it knowing that I may get a ticket for it, and then I choose to not drive 40 or not drive 30. These guys will drive any speed they want, and any cop that pulls them over just might get threatened or just might decide to leave them alone, but they're not just driving. It's everything. We have drugs up there. We have threats up there. We have people living in campers. The law, my understanding, is 14 days in national forest. I don't know what it is in residential areas. Every game is being played. It's a chess match against people that they have zero respect for. And to be clear, that's you. Eventually, one of those threats is going to be matched. When it is, we might make national news. If anyone does it, you can bet your ass I'll testify on their defense, and I will blame you guys. Every person has tried to play by the rules. The rules have not worked for us. The law enforcement officers, it doesn't work for them. We have become a joke. Realtors, I'm an appraiser. Realtors, appraisers, we all know what Bonanza Ranch is. We all know that there's no teeth. Nobody that makes the laws has the ability or the willingness to actually enforce anything up there. It has become an absolute joke. It is dangerous. We have theft of services. We have people dumping fecal matter on there. We have people threatening anybody that challenges it. We have people with 100 old cars that are stacked up because they can, because you or anyone in between told them not to, so they add 4 more. And if you'd like to comment on it, you can go to war with your hands, a knife, a bat, or a gun. Whichever one you choose, those nutcases are willing to do it. It is exhausting. We follow rules because we're decent people. If you guys don't give us the ability to back that, someone's going to get tired of being threatened. It's happened more than once. It is ridiculous. It is an absolute joke. We don't live in Coeur d'Alene to put up with that crap. We're supposed to be decent people here. Everybody has been, David and those guys have gone out of their way to help us. George has been up there 40 to 50 times without exaggeration. I spent time with him today. He would love to get that area cleaned up. I can walk to you almost as fast as we drove to 3 different properties. How's that for pathetic? Within a quarter mile of my house, there's 4 violations that are just absolutely flagrant. You can't even drive by those houses without picking out a number of code violations because they're right there in front of you. We've got people up there with small children that are living like third world countries because their parents are on drugs. I'll drive you to it if you'd like to drive. You have my address. Drive to my house. I'll take you on a drive. You wouldn't put up with it in your yard. You wouldn't put up with it on your street. And in Bonanza Ranch, I feel like we've been absolutely abandoned by everybody. I talked to somebody about a road one time, and they gave me a lecture of how in 1973 they didn't get an easement they wanted, so our road was not maintained. My take on that is I pay a hell of a lot of taxes. Every single department has given up on Bonanza Ranch because they don't have the ability to enforce anything. And the people that are breaking those laws think it's funny. They literally laugh about it. I've heard them. They laugh about it, they think it's funny, and they're more than willing to dare you to do anything to stop them because they know that if I'm following the law, I can't stop them. The people that are following the law or enforcing the law, they can't do anything about it. So what we're left with is a bunch of Unabombers up there laughing about how worthless we are, they are, and you guys are. It's ridiculous. It is preventable. It's not brain surgery. It's not hard. Put some teeth behind it. We've got guys up there that have code violations and liens against our property for 10 years. He laughs at how ridiculous and inept and weak that you guys are and everyone else in uniform is to prevent it or enforce it. It's a running joke. You have his name, it's Randall Robertson. It's not hard. You can look, I can show you on a map all the different properties he owns. You guys can look up the code violations and the liens on the property. Why in the world, the one thing I will say in their defense, if you're an absolute jerk, if you're somebody that is just so rude that you enjoy making other people's lives miserable, if you're that type of personality and the people that can legally stop you don't have the ability to do it, why would you stop? It's easy pickings. All we are asking for is for the ability for the laws that are in place to be able to be enforced and acted on so that we are safe and we have the ability to live like everybody else does. Thank you for your time.
Could I interject one more thing, please?
Yes, sir. Please.
Oh, that's to the chair's discretion, Madam Chair. Mr. Grizz, go ahead.
I'll be brief. Okay. I just want to dovetail what Larry was just saying there a little bit. It is a dangerous place up here because of the way people are allowed to live up here. This past week and a half, I've had to call the sheriffs on Paul Perez 5 times. this past weekend. He has multiple DUIs. He's been driving with no license. I know this has nothing to do with land, but I'm trying to paint a picture of the kind of people we're allowing to stay here. And this past weekend, he threatened to come over to my house and F me up, and he threatened to come over here and screw my wife, basically rape her when I'm not here. No joke. I can get you the sheriff that was out here that took the report. And I've got it all recorded, both on film and audio recordings. This is not a joke up here anymore in Bonanza Ranch, and we need help. Thank you.
And to piggyback off of him real quick, because why not? We all love drunk drivers. 3 times, it's just a matter of time before you get somebody. Would any of you like to come home with me tonight? I can tell you the car that Paul drives, it won't be in his driveway. I saw him leave earlier. At 4:30 this afternoon, he was not home. He leaves every single morning. How hard is it to stick a deputy out there and go, here's your number 5, your number 6, your number 7, your number 8?
I have Paul documented driving his vehicle. I'm a cameraman, and I've got very big lenses, and I sent them to another deputy who's investigating it now, and I've also been in touch with his parole officer to hold him accountable. Ever since he got his DUI back in February, he drives every single day, and there's a lot of times he drives in here drunk or high on something. So they're investigating it, but in a lot of ways their hands are tied too unless they catch him. But other crimes can be caught on the cell phone in a park or somewhere else, and they use it. So I'm pushing the fact that I've got all the metadata in these files. He needs to be held accountable. He needs to be hooked up and taken away.
We've got a family.
We have a dangerous situation.
We've got a family up there living in a tent, and 2 tents and a camper, as near as I can tell, with a little kid. I rode down that road last year and was met by somebody, went by a woman that wanted to know what I was doing on the road on my 4-wheeler. It's a public road. I'll go anywhere I want. I looked at that little girl and went, somebody needs to help her. You've got code enforcement, you've got the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department, you've got CPS, and you've got Panhandle State Health that all have some ability to fight some of that. And of those 4 groups, every one of them has 3 other organizations that can help prevent that. But nobody has the ability to help her. Absolute ridiculous. You can drive up there again. You got my address, come to my house. I'll drive you up there. It'll take 5 minutes to get there. We got a 50-50 chance of being met in the road by them, and you can see for yourself. It needs to stop. It's gotten way out of hand. It is to the point where Janice Sharp, if I remember correctly, is a realtor that wrote an article on how ridiculously weak the Kootenai County is to be able to stop the crap that goes on in Bonanza Ranch. How's that for awesome? That's something we should be proud of. Anyone can look up that article. It was written years ago. It's only gotten worse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That completes the testimony that I'm aware of.
Is there anyone else? Okay, do I have a motion to close
I
public
make a
comment?
motion to close the public comment, public hearing of case number ORA 23-0001.
Okay, the next thing is to enter deliberations.
We have to vote on it.
We'll take a
Oh,
vote.
sorry.
Yeah.
Vote. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Zale?
I'm for the court.
Yes. Okay.
We're voting to close
Just
the public
close-
hearing.
Close the public
hearing.
hearing. Yes.
Nami?
Commissioner Malloy?
Aye.
David? Glader?
Aye.
Dean? James?
Okay, would anyone like to start the deliberations, the discussion?
The only thing I wanted to do is, David, can you address the issue that was brought up by Jan, I believe, about no appeals process of what a director does? Her concern was that there's no, that you could make an arbitrary decision and the member of the public have no recourse on that. And I believe that any land use code.
I think that's a me question, actually.
Okay, I'm sorry, Pat.
Pat Braden, Civil Deputy Prosecutor, once again. 88601 E covers that. And that language is not proposed to be changed. If the commission desired, regarding language of 88603, it could be easily fixed by just taking the last sentence of paragraph G, which would be renumbered from paragraph F, and just make it its own subsection and say any decision of the director pursuant to this section may be appealed in accordance with Article 8.5.
Yeah,
That would fix that would make it that much clearer.
Personally, I would be in favor of that because.
And that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know if.
And that would be separated in a subsection H.
So for the record, it's already written now, but this would be calling it out as its own subsection.
Right, so much more clearer.
Sort of obvious.
Yeah, more obvious.
Yes, sir.
I guess I came to this maybe with a false premise that most of the violations are in the context of building or construction, moving earth, that kind of thing. It sounds like today, all the testimony I'm hearing, a lot of it is relative to landowners who are, you've heard it, who are doing bad things on their property. They really are the bad guys. Tell me what you're seeing. What is the nature of the violations?
It is often the case that people that violate land use code violate all sorts of codes. What you heard testimony today, I believe, is best addressed with a neighborhood plan. We are actually meeting, and Pat's been invited, with the Bonanza Ranch neighborhood. We're setting priorities on which properties to address first, second, third, and so on. And that's not a neighborhood plan that I'm thinking of, but at least we're taking action right now to deal with these code violations. What I don't have authority to do is all the other stuff you heard. That's where a neighborhood plan could be handy. The way that works is you pull the community and planning staff together, work through the issues, bring in the other agencies that are involved, like the Sheriff's Department, Panhandle Health, so on and so forth, and work up a set of solutions to address those issues. It's specific.
So this isn't really addressing those issues?
This is just really dealing with code enforcement of the
Okay.
land use and development code.
Right, okay.
That
So
people that drive drunk and say obscene things to their neighbors, that's a separate issue.
Right.
It's just that the two tend to go hand in glove.
But this would address the number of vehicles that are on a property.
For instance.
For instance, it would address how long someone stays in an RV or something like that. So
It
there
could
are.
certainly
so-
get to many of the
Yeah,
concerns.
many of those concerns. It also, but it wouldn't get to what the Sheriff's Department is responsible for, or Panhandle Health is responsible for. But this is a starting point to address something, and then, as you said, David, is then you start to loop more people in, more departments in.
Right.
Second question, enforcement. There's discussion about, Spokane, where they'll attach the property and put it up for sale. And I'm just ignorant of it. Do we have, and maybe it's a question for Mr. Braden, do we have a process by which, when these fees mount up against say a serial violator that you really want to go after, that you're able to attach the property if they're not paying? And what's that process and how summary is it?
In this case, if we wanted to go that far, I would seek a court order authorizing that, and then that would be recorded. Or, I guess I should say judgment would be more, precise with that language. That would be recorded and would constitute a lien against the property, and then we could foreclose on that lien.
Right, there's no prejudgment process?
That has happened once about 20 years ago. John Cafferty was the attorney that did that one. So it can happen. I mean, in that case, it was a lien for the cost of the cleanup, and it ended up where the property was actually transferred to the
But we
county.
didn't have this magnitude of fees back then or
No.
before now, and I'm envisioning you could have violators that will not pay and fees mount up, and then how do you enforce it and collect?
It'll be through court.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no prejudgment lien process. It'll have to be, get a judgment and record it.
I would not be comfortable doing that, going through that process. That particular process administratively, I would want
Right.
a court order authorizing that and imposing the lien and et cetera.
But I think that's where we are, especially at Bonanza Ranch. It seems to be a unique situation, right? I like the neighborhood plan kind of thing because I don't know that anybody out there, they probably don't care if the fine is $200 or $20,000. They're not going to pay it anyway. So I'm not sure this particular plan or amendment would accomplish much out there. I get the feeling from what I'm hearing. You got people out there that don't give a rip about anything. So whether it's like I say, even if we vote in favor of this, and I'm all for penalizing bad guys, believe me, I'm not sure it'll resolve the issue. I mean, if they don't have any money, it doesn't matter what the fine is.
That's why you need to seize the.
Pardon me?
That's why you need to seize the property, and it goes to an investor or somebody that buys real estate, and they will clean up the blight.
I agree.
Mr. Grizz, I'm going to mute you.
The public
Because the
hearing
public hearing has been.
Yeah, I
closed.
think all we could do, John, is what we can do. And this may not solve this particular issue, but it will resolve some other issues along the way over time. And the issue really comes down to what we've heard is the people that are in favor of it would like it to be more, if anything, than less. It's kind of intriguing, the escalation, but that's kind of also administratively a challenge, I would think. And then the anonymous reporting has always been a debate we've had on and off about the fact that while we understand the concept, the downside is then people can just simply give complaints because they don't like their neighbor, not because of any other reason. So I mean, that's something for David Callahan to figure out about how to handle anonymous. It's something that I understand the logic why it makes sense, but there's also a downside of that. So I guess the question that I would have is, we raised this from 10 to 20 because we thought 20 was more than 10, obviously, and more significant. And this was a starting point. And I think we discussed during the workshop that if this is not sufficient, there's nothing to stop the planning commission to come back and the county commissioners to come back and raise it and look at escalations and look at other alternatives. But this was a beginning, not an end, if I remember the discussions we had. So I personally am okay with this. I understand there are some concerns about the overlap between what David has and what Pat have, authority. That came from Twin Lakes, about that. But again, you have a discretion as a director to pursue or not pursue. And we are going to have people go into the appeals process. If they don't like what the director is doing, they could appeal it and make that more, highlight it more, type of thing. So personally, I think this is a good beginning point, and I would like to make a motion to accept whatever the ORA 23-0001 with the Pat. What am I saying, Pat? With the calling out of the appeals process.
Yeah, with the revision to clarify that any action taken by the director under section 88603 may be appealed pursuant to, in accordance with Article 8.5 of this chapter. And so you don't have to repeat it. You can just say what I just said.
Right. That's what I'm going to say. So
Right.
I make that motion that Pat just said. Okay.
It was just to, as I understand the way Commissioner Levine made it, to recommend that the board approve the proposal as presented with the revision discussed regarding decisions of the director being appealable.
Right. Yeah. That sounds much better than I said.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start at the other side. Commissioner James?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Glader?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Levine?
Aye.
Malloy?
Yeah, well, I have some concerns that have nothing to do very much with the amount of money. I'm all for the 20,000 or more for that matter, and punishing the bad guys. So now I can't decide if I should vote nay and explain myself, or if I should vote aye and explain myself.
Well, you can certainly explain your vote either way. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the time.
Yeah, I worry about the weaponization, which anonymous things could do.
Yeah.
And I worry about the process whereby the director, no matter who it is, can act autonomously, I guess. So I don't know. I'll make it right in a written. I'm going to vote aye, and then I'm going to explain my reservations.
I'm for this, so I'm voting aye.
There you go.
We passed.
With that,
I make a motion to adjourn. Do we need one of those?
I don't know, we need time, though.
It's 4:58.
7:21.
7:21. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys for your comments.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah,
Who was
we
the
really-
second?